Hi, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm good. Thank you. Could you please introduce yourself and include your pronouns and your profession?
My name is Bryan Mobley. My pronouns are he and him, and I work as a digital project manager for fusionSpan. I identify as a gay, and then I definitely add in a black. If you can't tell, man, I find that not only just being gay, but being black as well definitely shapes who I am and my experiences because I have a little bit of a different lens that isn't always typically seen in the popular culture and media. I was born and raised in Florida. My parents are Floridians on both sides, and I'm actually a seventh generation Floridian. Uh, how I grew up here is in South Florida, so Florida is kind of it's a little bit of a cultural divide because when you get from Orlando southwards, it's kind of a little bit more like a New York type of vibe with a lot of a mixing pot to it. My family comes from the Panhandle of Florida, Tallahassee, and Madison, Florida, and that's a little bit more of the South.
Did you have any role models either within your community or outside of your community as you were growing up?
The role models that I had growing up, of course, I would say my parents. As for gay role models, I didn't really have any that I knew of at that time. But for my gay role models, for me, I found in literature within the works of Patricia Cornwell and Elin Harris. Patricia Cornwell, her protagonist in series K Scarpetta, she has a lesbian niece, Lucy, who's just a kick ass and worked in tech and just did everything. And I admired the crap out of her. And then Elin Harris, his protagonist, as closeted gay black men trying to accept themselves and live in a way that didn't hurt their environment and help them. That was something that was a guiding light for me.
And so, do you feel like those books help you kind of realize your gay identity, or did you already have a sense and an understanding of your queerness at that age?
I actually knew about that probably when I want to say three or four. The
Mhm.
Little Mermaid was really big at the time, and I just remember being a kid and everyone being head over heels over Ariel, and I could not care less about her. I was into Prince Eric and wanting to get on the ship and travel around the world with him and his dog.
I love that. That's such a sweet way to recognize your queerness. And do you feel that you had access to queer spaces as a young person? Did you feel like you kind of had any queer community as you were growing up, or?
To be honest, not quite. Not quite. As I got older and when I got into college, I definitely was able to find more of a space for myself. But when I was younger, it was mostly church, family, and school. So
Mhm.
it wasn't a lot of queer spaces at that time. If I had to describe my profession to someone that's never heard of it before, as I said before, I'm a digital project manager. Basically, what I do is I work with clients and resources to create digital deliverables and make websites run quicker and better. At FusionSpan, we work in the IT association space, so we work with all vast variety of national associations, whether it be the American Psychiatric Association, all the way to the AstroTurf Association. And yes, they actually do have a National AstroTurf Association. They are my clients, and I work with them in helping optimize and modify their websites and their user experiences so people can do things of make a payment for their membership as well as them being able to gather informations to make more strategic digital ad campaigns to target certain markets. So that's what I do. My day to day pretty much consists of a daily stand up meeting at 9 o'clock with 15 to 25 people. Not only a couple of resources here in the United States, but in Nagpur, India, in El Salvador, Mexico, and then also in Toronto, Canada as well too. So I'm always talking to people across various time zones all throughout the day and coordinating their efforts.
And can you talk a little bit about where your interest in ad tech came from? Do you remember like your early interest in that field, getting into that field, or like at what point in your life you realized that that was something that you wanted to pursue or study?
My earliest experience of being exposed to ad tech or even technology in general comes mainly from my father. He is a
Mhm.
software computer engineer, has been since the 70s. And I remember being early as 3 years old and playing on Prodigy, which was an old school internet platform. And that's where I fell in love with being in front of a computer and wanting to do that the whole time as far back as I can remember. Being able to have computer time when my parents first allowed it, and then from there, my dad teaching my brother and I about the internet when we were younger. The earliest memories I remember was him teaching garbage in, garbage out, and then as we got older, explaining and letting us play around in a couple punishments that we had growing up of learning C plus and C plus plus.
Can you then talk about a little bit about your educational path into the field, whether that's been a traditional educational path or not?
It was traditional in the sense that I did go to a 4 year university.
Mhm.
Granted, I had a little bit longer of a gap year for a while, just because I always was working full time and going to school at the same time, so it was a little bit longer. Um, but to be honest, when I graduated, I didn't I didn't see a position as being a project manager. Definitely in IT. When I graduated, the advertising industry was still under the notion of whatever we put in print, scan it, and put it on the computer, and that's the website. And then within like 3 years of me working in the industry, it was a complete 180 to whatever we have on the website, television, radio, print, all need to drive to that. And
Mhm.
it became funny because the interest that I had of making groups and making events and helping my friends and my fraternity at the time get people involved in those was a social interest. And then that became more of my professional. It was in college that I started to see that it was that social media and especially Facebook at that time it was had opened up to everyone could have a Facebook account, not just college
Mhm.
students. So being able to see that space and how it was being utilized, that's when I was able to see that there was an opportunity there. I didn't really get to see it enacted until I actually started working at my first agency. I like to say the first agency I worked for was my boot camp of where I learned my professional and social skills. It was a bit of a good old boys club, and I definitely learned that how to quietly get things done that I needed to get done, and to be more of an asset at that time when it came to the technology and as it started to shift, that's where I was able to exhibit more of my knowledge. And then I was able to find a lot more confidence in myself and my professional skills as well.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience, whether it be that job or in college, about as a younger person who's part of the LGBTQ plus community? in this field. What was that experience like?
Going to school at UCF and being in the Orlando area, Post Nightclub was my home, and that was a place that I felt safe to be myself and to be out. And it gave me a lot of confidence in myself and just being in that community. When I moved back down to the South Florida area, the agency that I was at was in Fort Lauderdale, so we were less than a heartbeat away from the Wilton Manors area. So I was able to associate with a lot more gay and lesbian people just living in the South Florida area. It was welcoming, and it was a good respite because in my professional life I've always been out. I told myself when I was a kid, especially reading those Elin Harris novels, I didn't want to be like one of those protagonists that was living in their closet, and so I immediately would never shy away from the question of if I was gay or not. And then, as my dad would say, you got to accept the consequences as they roll in. So there was a bit of a stigma that I had to deal with for a while of being out, and especially in my company meant that for the first year and a half, I was in a department filled with women because as the HR told me, as a gay man, I would be able to identify with them and get along, which that was not always the case. So it was very interesting just having to advocate for myself sometimes and just reminding people that what they were seeing on television isn't necessarily a portrayal of or a depiction of who am.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like over the past 12 years now the industry has changed?
I feel like it's a lot more welcoming, especially as
Mhm.
the younger generation come of age and they start taking their places within the industry, and older people retire. Um, it's I'm seeing a lot more people that identify with the LGBTQ community, and I'm amazed by that, and I'm always happy to see that because it used to be a quiet hush hush under the table, pretty much when I started out.
Have you always felt comfortable being out in the workplace?
If we're talking about the beginning of my career, no, I did not feel comfortable being out in the workspace. I felt like I put a target on my back
Mhm.
because I already had one of being just a black man in a predominantly Caucasian field. And so I already had that target, and then and then outing myself as being gay put a double target on my back because I normally most people at that time wanted to try to put me in the stereotypes of, oh, I'm your best friend, I, I'm your the incredibly wise person that can magically come up with a solution for everything, or that I'm very good at decorating and interior design, none of which I'm not good at. But I definitely had to fight a little bit more to prove who I was and let them know who Brian was as a person. But I would say within the last 5 years, I've seen the scene change where it's a lot more welcoming, especially now, even with my the company that I work for now. If you were to go on my Zoom account, I proudly put my pronouns out there, and I encourage everyone else to do theirs as well too, so I can identify them accurately and acknowledge that. So.
Based on your personal experiences, do you feel that STEAM fields pose barriers for entry for marginalized communities in general? And you can talk about that kind of generally or specifically to your experience.
I do believe that there are barriers of entry for minorities when it comes to the STEAM program. Um, those strides are being made to break down those barriers. I still feel like if there's even one barrier, that's still one too many. For me personally, growing up, if my parents were not in the STEAM industry and that wasn't their personal passions, I can't imagine or can't even tell you where I would have been or ended up, because it's so ingrained to who I am. I remember my father fixing and building computers when I was a kid. To my mother, she worked in the arts for a little bit. She always encouraged my brother and I with pursuing music, as well as her personal passion when she became a teacher, and especially focusing on science and being a biology teacher. Heck, she still calls my brother and I up and will ask us questions like, "What does the mitochondria do?" And I'll be like, "Well, it's the powerhouse of the cell, Bob." And she's like, "Okay, just wanted to make sure so I can tell my eighth graders that my 30-something-year-old kid still knows what that means." So
That's amazing to have those role models as well to like encourage you to be in those fields and to kind of make those fields more accessible to you. Do you feel that people from marginalized communities bring something to the STEAM field? So not just what STEAM fields can bring to us in terms of, all the benefits that there are of working in those fields, but what do you feel that people from marginalized communities bring into these fields that would be missing if we weren't part of them?
oh my gosh, marginalized people bring so much to the STEAM field, that it's kind of hard to even describe. But I would just say their in my terms, I bring with me my life experiences, my way of viewing things, my unique perspective that sometimes would get lost. I think of the most prominent example in my mind was I was working with Sapient Nitro, and we were working on the ADT account at the time, helping them switch their marketing approach from being a traditional white family, being burglarized by a person of color, to being able to show that their security services were meant for all types of family, and family being open to not just one dad, to being two moms or a single parent, or even a minority family living in an upper class household. So it was cool to be a part of that and being able to be one of those faces that was there to help change that narrative. So
Based on your experience, in your opinion, what would true equity and inclusion look like for LGBTQ plus people in STEAM?
I think what it would look like is a safe place and an environment where people didn't think twice about like what your identity was or how you identify. At the end of the day, it comes down to the skill sets that you bring and the solutions that you bring to the table. Because I know for me as a project manager, what I encourage from my resources is, yes, I want to hear the problem, but let's think about the solution and how we're going to use that to address the problem. And when you're thinking about that, then it becomes more of an inclusive environment. Some of the things I think that would improve the space, especially for the LGBT community and just diversity in general, is going beyond just the checking boxes in companies. Making sure that you have a Zoom background for everyone's identity. That's great, but taking it a step further than that, making sure that practices are being monitored, and you're making sure that they're not discriminatory. Just being vigilant of that, making sure that you're not only identifying but you're welcoming a person's identity in there. If it's even small as remembering someone's pronouns, or just remembering that I might have a partner and asking about, hey, how's your partner doing, rather than just treating it as, oh, that's his social life and outside of work. Realizing that I'm a person and that I'm going to be Brian, whether it's from 9 to 5 and outside those business working hours. So I feel like those are some things that we can do to just make people feel more included.
What advice would you give to your younger self? And what advice would you give to people who are in the LGBTQ plus community who are interested in pursuing their passions in STEAM?
Okay. I would just tell myself three words: um, believe in you. Because to be honest, at the time when I was growing up, like I said, I didn't know that this path and even this position was available to someone like myself. Um, so and I didn't realize that everything that I was learning and all my interests and my passions would be perfectly suited for the career that I am now and the path that I'm trying to pursue. So that's what something I would tell definitely younger Brian. What I would tell others, especially younger, starting out in the community, um, you're gonna make mistakes. You're not always gonna know what's right, but as long as you are true to who you are, and at the end of the day, you feel good about what you've done, and what you are capable of doing, then that's all that matters in the end. And just know that life is life's a journey, and it's ironically funny because sometimes you end up right across the street from where you first started out from.